You're tuning in to Wellfound's Ask a Recruiter, where we sit down with recruiters to share their advice on the hiring process. My name is Rachel. I'm part of the product support team here at Wellfound. We're really excited to have Derek Johnson here with us today, and I'll give him a formal introduction in just a moment. And we're going to be talking about sort of a red flag advisory on how to spot warning signs and from companies, and then also how to present your best self. So how to avoid presenting red flags to companies when you're interviewing. And I'm really excited to get to some of these questions today with Derek. So I just want to talk just briefly about Wellfound in case anybody's joining that hasn't heard of Wellfound before and found out about this call through another means. We're a jobs marketplace. We help you get hired by cutting edge startups. And I should also note that sometimes bigger tech enterprise companies as well recruit using our services. We've been around for over 10 years, previously being known as AngelS Talent, and have a long history of hiring for tech roles. We've made over 8 million matches. We have over 150,000 tech jobs in our system. And it's just a great place to find these specialized roles in tech companies. Now to the good stuff. I want to introduce Derek. What I loved about meeting Derek was that he is a self-proclaimed candidate experience defender, which is why I was so excited to have him on this call. He's a dynamic talent acquisition leader with extensive experience scaling high growth startups from Series A to Series C. Derek has built recruitment teams that have scaled technical and go-to-market organizations across companies, including Cartwheel, Octave Health, WorkRamp, and Chili Pepper, or Piper, sorry. He specializes in go-to-market and general administrative hiring with additional experience in engineering and product recruitment, executive leadership hiring, and international expansions. He has a BS in industrial and organizational psychology from the University of Phoenix, and he combines strategic thinking with practical recruitment experience to help job seekers navigate the competitive hiring landscape and position themselves for success. Thank you so much for being with us today, Derek.
Thank you.
So I'll get started with just asking our first question. So finding opportunities to grow. Neil asks, everyone says they support growth. They put it in their job descriptions. How do I tell there's an actual potential career at a company rather than a dead end job? I thought this was a great question.
Absolutely. I love that question. One way that I've done this and one way that I love seeing candidates do this to me as a recruiter is, heading into that search, heading into that interview, doing your research on the company, trying to find out who might be in a similar position than the one that you're either prospecting for or interviewing for, and seeing if they've been able to navigate to different positions or kind of level up or have that upward mobility. If they have, sometimes you might even reach out to them to see what process or approach that they take. So that's one way to kind of suss out, like, is there ability to move within this company, specifically within the role or department that I'm going into or I'm looking, trying to get connected with. And then the second way is if you're actually involved in the interview process and you've started to speak with the team. One question that I ask, especially, if you're fortunate to speak with the hiring manager, is just asking them to provide you a time where they helped a team member of theirs like navigate the next step of their career. How did they, enable the upward mobility that the team member was looking for?
Oh yeah, I love that. I think that candidates sometimes forget to ask questions to the recruiter, and that's an opportunity to find out just a little bit more. Would you recommend that in like the first screening call?
You can just it always it doesn't hurt to start with the recruiter because they might have some insight that they gathered from the hiring team about like progression and growth on the team. So you can ask if they have that information. If not, they'll tell you and you can always save it for the next step.
Okay, great. Um, Thanks for that answer. So the next question we have is a more open-ended question about avoiding toxic workplaces. That's a pretty broad term. But Freddie asks, how can I tell if a company's culture is toxic before accepting a job offer? So what are some of the warning signs and questions they can ask?
Yeah, so one question that I really love to kind of lean on to assess a company's culture outside of just like tell me about the culture. All of the questions that I ask personally as a candidate and that I like to be asked as a recruiter are behavioral. So I ask the same type of questions basically that recruiters and hiring teams ask candidates. So what I'll say instead of like tell me about the culture of the company, I'll say I noticed that, the company lists that their values are X, Y, and Z. I really love this value that was posted on the website. Can you tell me about a time where this X value showed up for you as part of the company, and how was that demonstrated? And if they can like recite to you that they are actually living the values in a specific time that the value showed up, that's a really good sign that they are living the values. Now, if you ask that question and they kind of stumble a little bit and they can't really, speak to how they feel the value shows up, then that is the first sign. Other ways that you can really tell if a place might be toxic is just by taking inventory of the interview process that you've gone through. So if you're at the offer stage, you likely have gone through an extensive interview process, and just think about like, did the process that I went through, did it make sense for the job that I'm applying for? Were I given the opportunity to really showcase my skills? The questions, were they relevant to the job that I'm about to do? Did people show up prepared and respectful of my time as well? Those are questions that you can ask yourself, and it'll really tell you a lot about the company culture and whether they intend to set you up for success.
Oh yeah, those are two great tips. I wouldn't have thought of the asking specifically about a value. I love that one, especially because I feel like we've been hearing a lot about how important company values are lately on our other calls. Okay, great. And would you, just to extend this question a little bit, just because we're a startup kind of hiring platform, like, would you ask anything about like funding or like where they're at with that? I don't know if that's appropriate to even ask during a screening call or during an offer stage, but anything about like the financial health, because that can maybe indicate a bad or good working experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in light of today's kind of market and the way that things have gone, I think candidates are well within their right to understand if the opportunity that they're evaluating has the premise of like, stability. Um, where you place it in your interview process, I would say just gauge, the interview process itself and how it's going, and just kind of gauge the connection with the people that you're speaking with. But yes, I would ask questions about, something around the lines of like financial runway, what are, some of their big financial investments and initiatives that they have on the horizon, whether it be like product related as in terms of the product roadmap, any like major customers that they've been able to obtain, things like that that might give you a sense of the financial health of the company, especially as it might pertain to your role. I think well within reason to ask, especially well before you, if you've gotten to an offer, absolutely ask because you need to know before you sign.
Yeah. Okay, great. I suppose some of that information might be online through different websites or what have you, but still seems great to hear it right from them. Okay, cool. Let's try the next question. This one is more about how to present green flags from yourself while you're in an interview. So how do I answer the question, tell me about yourself in a way that leads to a strong impression? So
Yeah, I was once told by a hiring leader is when you're interviewing, that's your time to be modest or not be modest. That's your time to actually brag and brag well, and do it in an artful, tasteful way, but absolutely feel free to brag. So when you're answering the question, tell me about yourself. I always typically start in with just some, random facts about myself. So I'll say, hey, I'm Derek, I'm from Georgia, something like that. Just a little bit of a personal touch, but not too much. And then I'll kind of go ahead and segue into why I was interested in a position and, what kind of stood out to me. And then I'll talk a little bit about how my experience led me to this conversation and, let it go from there. So start out with a little bit of personal, a brief highlight as to, what interests you in this position, what you're looking for next, and then just a little bit of detail as to what you've done already and how that has prepared you for the next step. That should take you probably no more than about three-ish minutes to cover, and that should be well enough to answer that question with enough information for the interviewer to continue the conversation.
And in your experience, is there anything they should avoid doing? Like maybe you've seen some missteps that might be helpful to know about.
Well, one, I know it's a delicate balance, but when somebody says, tell me about yourself in an interview, you got to remember the context that you're in. And a lot of times I'm asked, like, do I lean on the personal? Like, what are they asking me? Are they asking me about personal, professional? And I would say stay away from the personal details that have no relevant context to the setting that you're in. So, like, don't mention hobbies, don't mention, things that people could learn about you later once they work with you, things like that. And definitely don't take the conversation and don't be too verbose with that leading, because that's like one of the first questions that you're asked. So you don't want to lead too much with that and overshare to the point where you've left nothing for the rest of the conversation. And now you have limited time to cover other relevant details.
Sure, sure, because they're going to ask some pointed questions on that call, I'm sure too. That makes perfect sense. Okay, awesome. Um, okay, and I like this one a lot because I think it is something that comes up in interviews and maybe rattles some people. So Tara's asked, how do I talk about a failed project without it sounding negative when when you're in an interview?
The key to that for me is ownership. As like the primary keyword there is ownership. So being able to know, like when somebody says, tell me about a weakness or a time that you failed, owning, like, there was this project that I worked on where I failed, and here's what I learned and here's what I would do differently. So ownership in the fact that you did fail. Don't be afraid to call it a failure, but then talk about, like, what steps did you take that caused you to fail? After that, in retrospective, what did you learn to course correct? And now knowing all of those learnings, what would you do differently? And how have you, taken steps to make sure that the next time you're presented, that you can avoid the missteps?
Awesome. I love accountability. That's like my top number one value, I think. So I completely get what you're saying. Okay, and navigating gaps. This question comes up a lot for us as well. So, what is the best way to navigate? Thomas asked this question. What is the best way to navigate a gap in your work history?
Again, ownership and transparency. If it's listed there, they may or may not ask for it, depending on the company, depending on the context. They may not ask for reasons behind it, but transparency is the best way to really navigate that, in my opinion. So if you took a year off to be a parent because your kid needed you for the last year or the last 3 years, um, own that for one, and the transparency within that. But then also, when it comes to gaps, don't be afraid to be creative. So if you literally took a gap to, like, focus on your mental health and well-being, I'm pretty sure there's something that you taught yourself as a skill. There's something that you stumbled across where you learned something new that could be relevant in your now job search. So use that time to be creative and say, yes, I took a year gap for X, Y, and Z, but during this time, I was able to acquire this knowledge set. I was able to do this new thing that I was really passionate about. And here's how this enables me to now be ready to re-enter the workforce.
Oh yeah, I love that. And also I wonder about like how to like literally acknowledge it on a resume. Like maybe you've got some advice for people on how to put it into your LinkedIn or your resume when people are reviewing that.
Yeah, I would basically just give like a brief synopsis of the same way that you would cover it in an interview, just in a shorter, kind of truncated format. So if you took a year off for mental health, but you know, in that time you picked up a new skill or a new hobby that, could be relevant for something later in the interview process or in the job, or just cool for an interviewer to know. List that there. So the same way that you would list like your responsibilities and job duties for when you were working, anything that you can kind of pull from that give some clarity to that gap, do it.
Awesome. Good. Oh, yeah. We ran through those questions really quickly, which is great. Your answers were so concise. So, uh, we're going to open this up to live questions. If nobody has any live questions, I'll pull from the intake survey, but I'm hoping some people would like to ask a question out loud. I'm just going to open up my view of our guests so I can see if anybody raises their hands. Does
Oh,
anyone
I'll,
have?
I'll take myself off mute. Hi, Derek. I'm Tammy. A question for you. So let's talk about the job market and what are the hot skills or experiences that are the most in demand?
Yeah, so and from my, from my purview, I think right now in this job market, the the one skill that I say would be in demand is somebody that is adaptable and somebody that is able to be agile. And I know that sounds cliche because a bit of it is, but I think the key to navigating this job market is being able to kind of move and be fluid in adapting your skills and abilities to get you back on your feet, and do so in a way that is going to not only be fruitful for you, but also showcases the skills that you have that are relevant to the companies, or if you don't have them, how you would be able to obtain them. So like agility, willingness to be flexible, always being, willing to be a team player, and kind of being self sufficient. A lot of that right now is very sought after in this job market.
Thank you.
Yeah, Terry, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I have one. I have it written down, so I'll read it to you. Hi, Derek. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much. How do recruiters like you differentiate a candidate with corporate experience trying to break into startups from someone who's already worked at a startup?
Good question. So it depends on the company and the recruiter and what we're recruiting for, and basically the marching orders, if you will, that we have from the hiring team for the role that you're applying to. Some hiring teams will literally tell us like, ideally this is the profile that we're looking for. Somebody that comes from a larger tech company or a smaller tech company, and has likely has the skills and ability to adapt in our startup environment. So that's one way that we kind of approach it when we're reviewing resumes. But what I would say is, if you are a candidate with a profile that is trying to break into like a smaller startup company, and you come from a larger, more enterprise company, the fact of the matter is, yes, you come from that larger enterprise company, and sometimes it might be hard for hiring teams to understand your skill set and how that might be able to be parsed out. But I would just say, break out your experience and try to segment a little bit to say, yes, I worked at this large company, but within this, on my teams and in my departments, we had smaller orgs that I were a part of that would be very comparable to this um, smaller startup environment. And that's going to help recruiters understand like, yes, they worked at this large company, but they also worked on these smaller teams and these smaller projects that are very relevant.
You.
Oh, that's such a good answer. We've gotten that question before, but I haven't heard that strategy. We've got a question from Tanya, or I hope I'm saying her name right, in the chat. I'm going to read out, and then I see Alexandra, you've got your hand raised, so I'll ask you right after. Um, so she asks, how do you include your experience as a 1099 contractor when you finished projects for various companies? I'm asking how to include it so it doesn't cause any issues with ATS scanning.
Ooh, that's a hot question. because I know there's a lot of like myths and information about like ATS and how much of that is AI and how much of that is like real people. I will say that yes, we are starting to include like AI assisted technology with the recruiting process for sure, but like the majority is still being reviewed by like real people. And we are putting eyes on the resume. So that's just a side point, but like to get back to the direct question, and I know sometimes working contracts can be viewed as like shorter stints, not really stable. And, depending on the company, depending on the person, people will view it different ways. But what I would say when it comes to listing it, depending on the number of contracts that you've worked and the amount of time that you've worked within those contracts, sometimes I would tell you list it as normal as you would like a full-time W-2 job or just a W-2 job. But if it's been like multiple contracts within a certain short period of time for various reasons, I would find ways to just kind of like group it together in a way that makes sense. If it's like contracts where you've worked in similar industries, doing pretty much the same thing just for different companies, those are times where you might be able to group it together and just kind of list the years of experience that you cover broadly, where you were covering like this certain set of responsibilities and skills that you demonstrated.
I can see that she now thank you. So that's good. I have a question, any like follow-up questions for like ATS advice that you have? It always comes up on every call.
Yes, I said thank you.
So
Yeah, so with ATS, I'll be honest, guys, there's so much muddle out there in the world and in the internet universe. Um, I'm losing sight of what like is actual factual information and what is like complete bluff myself.
yeah,
Um, but what I would say is the things that matter to me when I'm reviewing is not like a certain order, like a certain font or anything like that, or whether it's saved in a certain format, like doc versus PDF. Some people will tell you to like make sure it's PDF, some people will tell you to make sure it's doc. All of that might be relevant, but what I would say is the number one thing that comes down to like reviewing resumes, app review, ATS, is making sure that your work history and that your presentation of your profile, meaning you yourself, is in an order that is clear, is succinct, and easy for us to read. Whether it be, like I said, 9 times out of 10, it's a human. ATSs aren't really like self-scanning resumes and knocking people out. I know people are saying that, but just not that's not true. Um, so my point is, if the primary thing to do is just to make sure that what you're presenting is easy to read and easy to follow. So whatever order you're putting it in, making sure that we can clearly see your skills, making sure that we can see like a summary of yourself, why you're applying to the job, and what skills you have that are relevant.
great.
And making sure that it's at least in a font size that we can see. Like that's the only thing that's the only thing I would say, is making sure that the font size is big enough for us to see.
I love that
What's a good
emphasis.
font size?
Yeah.
It depends on the eyesight, but like for me, I would.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
when you use Times New Roman, it's 12 points. When you use Arial, you can use 10 points.
Oh, yeah. I think for accessibility design, they say at least 14, but maybe that's big
Well, that's for accessibility, yeah. The
for,
bigger, the better.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that might be for web use is what I'm remembering, but I was just pulling it. Anyways. Maybe we can move on to Alexandra's question. I know that you've got your hand up for a while. Let's jump in. Do you want to ask it out loud?
Hello, do you hear me?
I do.
Okay. So I have a situation. I have very big career gap. And I started to volunteer. I have been volunteering daily for over 2 years. And I want to return to a highly competitive tech industry. And my question is, how do I need to write in my resume about my experience if it is all other volunteering work? How do recruiters perceive such a long free work?
Great question. So, in those situations, there are a few things that you can do to kind of give yourself the leg up in terms of perception of your volunteer experience. One, I would say if there is an opportunity and a space in the application for you to write a little bit of a cover letter, um, and those are instances where I truly believe in cover letters for providing that additional context that might not be exactly present or clear within the resume format itself. So maybe, just writing a little bit of a cover letter, kind of explaining your volunteer experience and how it, some of the reasons why you've been purely volunteering for the last 2 years, and then also how that volunteer experience kind of um, is very comparable to the work that you're applying to now, and this skills and experience will serve you well in the role that you're applying for. Um, so you can approach it from the cover letter standpoint, just making sure that the context is there. And the second thing that I'll say is, although it's volunteer experience, it's still experience. And as long as you can clearly show in your resume how that experience that you gained while volunteering directly relates to, or even, would be transferable to the job and the duties that you're applying for, recruiters should perceive it the same way. But in the situation where you may have been not having that experience or not having that luck, that's where I would really lean on cover letters or some additional information to kind of help bridge the gaps and make sure that the context is there.
Thank you.
Very helpful. We have a question from Bess in the chat. Do you want to read it out loud? Maybe?
Sure, happy to. Hi, Derek. Thanks for sharing time with us today. From your perspective, what are the top 1 to 2 mistakes very experienced candidates make while interviewing?
Okay.
That's a good question. So I would say, in my experience, like if a candidate is very experienced, like very senior, they are going to rightfully want to tell you so. And sometimes they kind of come in with energy and they want to kind of explain right away, like everything that they've done that has prepared them for the job, for the role, and why they are a senior, which is great because, again, I truly believe in advocating and owning your experience and just kind of showcasing who you are. But I think not doing that in a way that allows the conversation to carry out naturally, and not doing it in a way so that it is perceived that you are senior versus maybe someone that is, and I hate this term, but maybe someone that is just a little too cocky. Sometimes there's a fine line between advocating, showing your seniority, and being just a tad bit too cocky within it.
Awesome, thank you.
Great. And then we've got a question from Terry in the chat. Terry, do you want to read out loud? I can also read for you.
Yeah, no, I can read it for sure. Thank you. What are the key qualities of or experiences that startup hiring managers value most in marketing candidates, especially in early stages companies, Series A to C?
So you're asking like specifically for marketing roles, what are some?
Yeah, I'm a marketing guy. I come from, that's my experience, brand marketing, content creation, advertising, and I've been on a Wellfound looking through various jobs and trying to see in the marketing department what I relate to, making sure that I have the necessary certificates that stand out as soon as you see my resume at the top. and then going through my listed experiences, using as much data to show that yeah, because I was heavy in the performance arts background, being in radio for almost a decade, and then since you're from Georgia, I worked at the Fox Theater in Atlanta for almost 4 years in the marketing role, from analytics to creative. And so just looking at these different jobs and seeing how do I, for lack of better words, index with everyone else who is applying to these jobs. What are everyone else looking for, so that I could be competitive as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Terry. It sounds like you definitely have covered a lot of the marketing landscape from like end to end, on both like the analytics and the creative side. What I can tell you, at least from like my perspective working in these startup companies, a lot of times, depending on the size and the stage of the market of the company, their marketing team will be very lean and like very limited in resources. So the people that they are looking for would be someone that would be comfortable kind of working within an ambiguous environment. Uh,
Mhm.
People that can, kind of carry the full scope from A to Z. So running the full life cycle for marketing, whatever that might be. And then really being able to take a little bit of like creative direction and turn that into a full vision.
Campaign, right? Okay, cool.
I feel like I was smiling during that because that's been my experience at startups, is seeing sort of lean marketing teams being so scrappy and so doing that full-fledged approach. Um, awesome. That was a great question. Thanks so much, Terry.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions they want to ask out loud? I can also pull from our intake questions from the survey.
I do. This is Beth again. Hello. What questions should we have asked you during this Q&A session that we
Right.
didn't ask?
Ooh, I feel like I'm interviewing, which is great. No, seriously, I think for the purpose of this call and what we were intending to do, hopefully I've shed a little light as to what red flags can you identify within a company when you're interviewing and when you're trying to research a potential job that you're interested in, and how to showcase yourself in the best light on the flip side of that. I think you guys have asked like really great questions as to all of that and how to best position yourself, for sure.
Well, like, is there anything that you wish candidates knew
I
from
have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you are reviewing resumes, is there anything that you see? What is it that worries you when you see on a resume? Like,
That's a good question.
what are some of the red flags? So you see something on a resume. What would be those things that you see that would cause you to hesitate about a candidate?
Yeah, really good question. So the number one thing that would cause me to hesitate, again, this is all within the context of viewing this from trying to identify the best candidates for the particular role itself in position. And regardless of whatever role in position, when I'm reviewing resumes, what would cause me to hesitate is if all of the information on the resume is surface level. Meaning that, it just basically describes just straight up job description bullet points. Like if you were working in customer service and your bullet points just says took calls, phone calls within the call center, and answered questions and took chats, but like there was no mention of ways that because like my context is 9 times out of 10, if we're hiring for a role, we've already gotten like basic level information from the hiring manager, from ourselves, what the duties of the role likely would be. So what we're looking for on the resume is, yes, the person performed the duties, like the baseline duties, but also how did you achieve those things and what approach did you take to accomplish um whatever you were able to accomplish. So if I'm not seeing any supporting context to like give me the whole story on the resume, if I'm not seeing any metrics or data that support like what you were truly able to do and how you helped the company achieve XYZ goal and how you helped yourself get that promotion. If I'm not seeing data that helps me like get that picture, that's what makes me hesitate. If everything that I'm looking at is surface level, that's going to tell me 9 times out of 10 that the person is not strategic enough in their approach in order to be likely successful in the role.
Okay, would you hesitate to hire someone, let's say if your job requires like 4 years of experience and that person has more than 4 years, would you hesitate to hire someone like that?
Good question. That depends on just the parameters around the role and also the information that we've gotten from the hiring team. I know a lot of this is like background information that front-end job seekers are not aware of, but for various reasons, sometimes a company and a hiring team will place limits on the number of years and the amount of experience that a person can have. Likely, it does not have anything to do with your background itself. Sometimes it has just to do with the budget and us knowing that like our budget can't match someone that has 10, 20 years of experience and we're like not offering anything that likely is going to be comparable to what they expect. So sometimes there are other factors that kind of go into us um, using experience as a qualifying factor, but just at a surface level to answer your question straight on, the number of years of experience, barring that none of the what I just stated is true, should not prohibit me from moving forward with you. Just because you have over the number of experience than the minimum that's required.
Okay, thank you.
Great. I'm going to ask a question that was from our intake survey from a man that I'm curious about. They asked, what are some pain points mentioned by startup companies that would lead you to thinking they're unorganized? And I just thought, I like that question.
um, and I'm kind of losing my thought track on that one, but there are things that like a startup company can mention or that they can deal with that might um make you think that they may not be in the best position in terms of organization. Um, you know, if you ask about like the standard tenure of people within the company or the standard tenure within someone, for someone within this role and it's, kind of short-lived, that might tell you that they have a retention problem. If they've kind of struggled to identify like their market and the audience that they're trying to attract and attain in terms of customers and they can't really like nail down a specific product roadmap vision, that might tell you that they kind of lack vision and clarity and direction. Things like that would kind of signal to me that they may not be fully baked yet, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, those are great things to look for. And we have another question from Terry. Do you want to read out loud?
Yes. The question is, what's the best way to stand out when applying to roles at high growth startups that receive hundreds of applications per opening?
Good question. And fully loaded.
Thank you.
That is a hard feat to do today, and I will not lie to you all about it because the reason that you're asking that question is because you're likely aware that the competition is stiff, and it is. Um, what I would say is one, make sure to apply. So make sure, and I know that sounds like duh, but make sure to apply. And when you're applying, make sure that you've done your best to read over at least the minimum qualifications for the role and kind of pointed your direction in your application in the direction of those minimum qualifications at the very least. And then other ways that you can stand out is, to me, the name of the game is all about networking. So leverage your network, whether it be LinkedIn or any other platforms that you're on, trying to find people that are within the organization that you're applying for. If you can find the hiring manager or someone on that specific team, great. I've encouraged candidates to go above and beyond, like reaching out to someone's LinkedIn inbox because those messages are few and far in between as well in terms of actual reply. So ways that you can stand out is one, personalizing your messaging and communication. If you can find something specific about that person, their background that you can relate to and tie into, utilize it. And if you have the time and the energy, try to find that person's email address, their work email address, of course. Don't like email somebody's personal, but if you can find their work email address, send them an email, and maybe consider like including a video of a short introduction that explains like who are you, you apply for the role, and what are some like top key things that make you a fit for the role. It's not guaranteed, it's never going to be a perfect science in terms of standing out, but those are some ways that kind of go above and beyond just the traditional inbound application or just sending a cold message.
I've noticed that videos have become a trend, and companies asking for videos for you to send them in. So
Yeah, and I have mixed feelings about that at the application stage, but for in the context that you asked the question about standing out where you're electing to send the video yourself possibly, go for it if it's at your comfort level.
yeah, thank you.
That was a great question. I'm gonna see if Austin wants to ask his intake survey question. You had asked about switching career fields and any advice that Derek might have. Do you want to ask?
Yeah, sure. Is my mic working all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I guess if I can remember the question, basically, wondering if you had any advice for someone who's not only trying to switch careers, I guess a little bit of context from a mechanic to a software developer, who also doesn't possess any kind of a degree in how to maybe come across as not incompetent, maybe?
Fair question. Well, the good thing is, I think we're as a society, we're shifting for the most part away from like hardline must have education to being more skill based, for sure. So, just leading with that to throw that out there. So unless the position specifically requires a bachelor's or master's, like don't let that hurt or damage your confidence at all. But when it comes to career pivoting, again, it can be a challenge to get the notice and to get the traction that you need to inch ahead. But in those instances, what I say is try to find ways to level up your skill and to gain that knowledge that you're looking for to help you bridge the gap. And you probably are likely already doing this, but like for software engineering, there's boot camps that you can enroll into where you can complete projects and do like actual tangible engineering work that you can then turn into a portfolio to submit with your applications and include in your outreach. That's a great way to show like, yes, I'm making this transition, but I've already started completing projects, and this is what I was able to do. These are the skills that I was able to obtain, and this is what I've learned. So that's a great way to kind of help you get like that actual experience under your belt and be able to submit that with your application. And then the rest of it for me, Austin, just goes back to connecting and learning. So finding people who are in the positions that you want to be in, who are in those roles that you want to be in, and who are in those companies that you want to work for, grabbing coffee chats with them, learning about what they do every day, building connections, building rapport, seeing if maybe they're willing to like, mentor and shadow. Those are great ways for you to like, again, take a different approach to gaining like tactical skills that you can then use when applying for jobs, but it also helps you gain like inside knowledge and gain a champion that you can then leverage when you're applying.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good advice. It's
I
great.
have a very random question. What is the perception of a candidate whose note taker joins the interview?
Again,
What?
and I'm hoping that companies are not like perceiving this as a red flag, because there's various reasons why somebody might leverage a note taker, and it could be for accessibility reasons. But just in general, I don't necessarily see it as an issue, because that just means that you're wanting to be strategic in your approach, and you're wanting to make sure that you're able to retain information about the conversation held that you can then reflect back to. What I would do in those cases, just because I'm not sure on what side of the coin this may be landing in terms of perception,
Mhm.
when you're interviewing and you know that interview has been set up, um, maybe consider disclosing with them, like, hey, I'm thinking about having my note taker join the call for XYZ reason. Is this, permissible, or should I maybe approach another way? And that'll tell
Okay.
you a lot about the company. Again, going back to that red flag advisory, depending on your reason, they should be okay with it. And if they are not, they should at least, kind of kindly explain why not, and then discuss alternatives for you being able to like move forward and capture the information needed.
Okay. Thank you.
And if they do none of that, probably a red flag.
Check.
Yeah, I feel like that might I think it makes a lot of sense to ask beforehand, and also just from even calls I've had with recruiters for doing these webinars, there's some topics that they can't talk about because they work at startups and they have intellectual property that maybe could come up on a call. So
Yeah.
that seems like very wise advice considering the context. Sure. Um, okay. Well, we're almost at the end. Does anyone have any, I can ask another question from our intake survey, but since y'all are here, I'd prefer to ask you. Sure, Terry, go for it.
One, I thank you for this seminar, Derek. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Rachel, for putting this together. I have found you guys on LinkedIn, and I've added you as well. Uh, and I just wanted to know, would it be okay and professional to send you guys messages asking you further questions in the future if any thoughts, especially Derek, I'm in the Atlanta area. So,
Yeah. And I'll say to the entire group, if any of you feel that I can be helpful in terms of insight for you as job seekers and candidates, feel free to add me and reach out to me. I'll do my best to respond. Part of why I became a recruiter is because I really want to be, and that's why I dubbed myself the candidate experience defender, because I really wanted to be a part of the good force when it comes to candidate experience. I know that applying for jobs can be very daunting and can definitely take a toll on your spirit. So I just want to be a part of the good guys out there that do this for the reasons that we do it is because we love connecting people with jobs and gainful opportunities. So if I can be a part of that journey for you and answering questions and just giving advice, even outside of this call, feel free to reach out to me.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and just to extend that, and also I love that. That's so the spirit of what we're trying to do here is just make people feel a little less lonely in this strange experience. But I should point out that we also have a Discord channel. I'm not sure if the users here would be into that, but it's a place that you can go where you can meet with other candidate communities, maybe connect with someone else in your profession. And we also have a sort of channel where we do resume reviews, and I look at that channel usually to help out people kind of offline off of a call. And feel free to join after this. I'll hang out there for like a little bit. If a question hasn't been answered or you're too shy to ask it to a whole group, feel free to pop in there. So it's another way to connect with us. And then I guess I should just say that for all of you using Wellfound, like you can always write to us at talent@wellfound.com, or into like the little chat thing. You're going to find either like me or Alejandro or other people from our team, real people, not a bot, who are happy to like answer your questions if you're having any problems with any of the opportunities that you're applying to on Wellfound too. I did see one other question come in, which we have time to do. So let me just find it. Oh yeah, this is a good question. Austin, do you want to ask it out loud?
Sure. Maybe a tad specific, but from a like software engineering hiring role, frequently it's common to be given some kind of a take-home assignment. Is there maybe along the lines of red flag question, is there kind of a certain like length or size of said project that you might just see as like I guess at what point does it become ridiculous? I've been given one that was a 40-hour assignment before, and it, especially when you don't wind up getting the job, it's like, at what point does that become unreasonable? And maybe do you have any suggestions on how to navigate, you know, more or less refusing to do it or trying to negotiate maybe some kind of compensation for it while not coming out as, just shooting yourself in the foot on the position?
Right. Yeah, very good question. And I think it fits well with the topic today about like identifying red flags. If a take-home assessment is that long, that may indicate that they're not sure what they're assessing and what they're looking for and how they're trying to assess it. So they're kind of like lumping everything together. Typically speaking, just on average, a take-home assessment, when sent to you, regardless of the role, but like, um, should not take any longer than like an hour or two. Like, maybe for engineering, like 2 hours top, depending on what they're asking you to do. But I think you have the right mindset in mind of like kind of identifying when it's too long. I would say anything over 2 hours for a take-home assessment, again, for like engineering especially, would be bordering kind of ridiculous. um, and then in terms of like just navigating, again, up to you to kind of use your discretion in kind of judging the conversations and the vibe and the environment of the people that you connected with in the process. But, your recruiter should be able to be used as an advocate for you and certainly a fountain of information. So if you feel like as you're reviewing the assessment and you're looking over it in the length of time that you're being asked to commit, that it just doesn't make sense for you and it just doesn't feel right, um, consider like asking them, what was the purpose or the intent? Like I understand that I have this assessment in front of me as a next step for the role, but can you just shed a little bit of light as to, what is the purpose or the intent of this fully? I noticed the length of it and just trying to make sure I understand. And then maybe asking them like, how will my submission be assessed? What is the grading criteria? And that should help you kind of gauge do they have a direction for where they're going? And that you can kind of use that to determine if it's worth you um continuing. And then the whole compensation piece, it just depends on the company. Personally, I feel like if it, hits a certain amount of time, you should be getting something. But again, that's really just a discretion type of thing where you can use your discretion as to whether you want to kind of, take the gamble on that.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I actually think that was such an important question to ask. Thank you so much, Derek. And thank you so much for everyone for joining and Derek for answering these questions so thoughtfully and, just for being a candidate defender and champion. It's really meaningful to know that someone like you is out there on the other end receiving resumes and interviewing people. So if you have a chance, it would be great to hear some feedback from all of you about how this went, how we can maybe organize the next ones, and even topic suggestions. I would welcome those for knowing what would be most helpful for our candidate community. So Alejandro just put the survey in the chat. So if you've got a chance, I'd really appreciate that. And then, yeah, anyone who wants to join the Discord, please come. We have another, the survey is also a way of signing up for future invitations to webinars. We've got another one next week on how to negotiate salary and sort of like lifting like the curtain on some of those questions on how to navigate what can be sometimes a tricky conversation once you get to the offer stage. So you're welcome to join us for that one. So sign up in the survey to just let us know you'd like to be added to the invite list. So I hope everyone has a really great day.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Derek.
Thanks, Rachel. Bye.
Yeah, bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Ready to find your next role or discover top talent? Visit us at wellfound.com.